Hello and welcome back to this epic series where we look at humans versus chess computers. We study the progression of strategies developed through history by humans to combat the ever-increasing power and intelligence of chess AI. And today we are looking at Game 6 of the 6-game match played in 1996 in Philadelphia with white in this game, the human player Garry Kasparov, world champion at the time, and the deep blue IBM supercomputer that could calculate 200 million positions per second. In the first game, for the first time in history, a chess computer beat the chess world champion at chess. In the second game, humanity strikes back with an amazing win by Kasparov. Game 3 and 4 are both drawn, but then in the last game before this, in Game 5, Kasparov outdid himself and actually won against the machine with the black pieces. So for the first time in the match, Kasparov is ahead. So now with the white pieces, he only needs a draw and starts out with knight to f3. If he gets a draw now, he will win the match. Computer plays d5, and this is a repetition, d4, of game 4, where Kasparov forced a draw with white, pawn to c6. But as we have discussed earlier, in a way, Kasparov is not only playing against the machine, in a way he is also playing against humans. Due to the opening book, the Deep Blue team were allowed to update the computer's opening book from game to game. And they had Grandmaster Joel Benjamin for this task. And he had seen that this is something that could happen. He had gone into his study and developed a new variation in this opening exactly for this moment, exactly for when Kasparov tried this opening again to force a draw. So far, his new move, his novelty, has not been shown, but it is not far off. Kasparov plays e3, still the same as in the last game. But now we see this pawn, which has already moved, move again to challenge the center immediately. This is an important deviation. How will Kasparov deal with it? He plays pawn to b3. We have to remember that Kasparov is in a position that no human has ever been in before. He is sitting with the whole world watching, defending humanity against the silicon monster. If he gets the draw, he will win the match, and he will have defended humanity. But if he loses, the match will be tied, and it will be unclear if humans can still be better than the machines. So the pressure is real, and even though it is an advantage to have the white pieces, and many grandmasters pride themselves on their ability to get a draw when they need it with the white pieces, we have seen many examples of players of world chess champion caliber lose with white even when they were going for a draw. Bishop to e7. How is Kasparov handling this? Very sensibly, I would say, just developing his pieces, not trying anything fancy, not going for any crazy imbalances or anything. He's developing according to normal theory. But this move here, bishop to d7, is perhaps the moment Kasparov has been waiting for. This is not part of theory. It has not been repeated since. And it's a fine move, but it's it's a little unambitious, maybe. He castles, starts to think about what can we do here. But before he enacts a plan, we see something crazy from the machine. It plays knight h5, and we know that a knight on the rim could be dim because it is limited out here. In the center, it can attack 8 squares. On the side, only 4. So what is Deep Blue doing? Well, Kasparov centralizes his rook, looking down the e-file, and the knight lands on this square. We now see Deep Blue's plan. The knight is aggressively placed, attacking this bishop. But these kind of two-move threats we have seen from the predecessor of Deep Blue, Deep Thought, before, and we have seen it come in with these short-term threats, and we have seen Kasparov just move his pieces back, saying, in this case, a bishop like in the last game against Deep Thought, this bishop is just as effective back on b1 as it was on d3. So did you really gain anything by putting the knight here, or did you waste time? Computer plays bishop d6, defending the knight, looking at a possible attack against the king. On the dark squared diagonal, Kasparov handles both of these issues with one move, pawn to g3, simultaneously kicking the knight back and also blocking the bishop. And this knight, what could possibly be Deep Blue's reason for having this crazy maneuver? Well, it's looking at this square. This knight is looking at this square. This bishop is looking at this square. So Deep Blue is thinking about possibly breaking in the center like this. Kasparov understands this and says, nope, we block that up. Deep Blue develops this rook to this potentially open file. Right now it is semi-open, and a mysterious move by Kasparov. A move that could be tempting could be to establish what we call the Pillsbury knight with a forward knight defended by 2 pawns like this. This loses for tactical reasons, so Kasparov does not play this. Maybe then knight here to keep defense of this knight so we can recharge it if it's captured. No. Kasparov plays what modern chess computers consider to be the best move in the position, but it is very mysterious. He has this super strong knight, and this bishop looks like it's not doing anything, but it did move to this square, and it was a bit unambitious, and Kasparov chops it off. It is recaptured by the queen, and this is very deep positional chess going on. Now this knight comes to f3, looking again at e5. The bishop comes out with an attack on the rook. The rook does have to move. It slides up. And this rook is now also developed. So Deep Blue looks to have a lot of power, but this knight has a hard time getting into the game. But if Deep Blue can open up the center, it can start utilizing the concentrated forces here in the center. But this knight is a bit dubious. It doesn't have anywhere good to go. And like Grandmaster Aman Hambleton always says, if you see a knight on g6, try to chase it away with h4. Now this pawn can come here and harass the knight. Prophylactically, there's a chess term that means anticipating the threat before it materializes on the board. Deep Blue plays this knight back here. And in this position, Kasparov has a crazy tactical shot that he can try. A 400-year-old chess tactic called the Greek gift. The Greek gift is if you sacrifice the bishop on h7 with a check against the king. Now Kasparov didn't play this. We will explore this line a little bit, and then I will explain what he played and why. So this is actually a sacrifice of this bishop. The king could and should recapture. What is the point? The point is that we now have an entryway to make an attack against the king for white, and these pieces are blocked off by the pawns. They have a hard time coming in to defend. We start with check like this. Sometimes against the Greek gift you can survive by coming forwards with the king. Not in this case. This check would be devastating, so the king would have to go back. But boom, the queen comes in, threatening check and threatening check. The queen would have to come down here to defend this. We can now throw this check, and it looks like this would be checkmate, but it can just about defend like so. And this position is great advantage, I would say a winning advantage for white. But if you mess up, you will be down a piece, and if the attack does not work, then you will end up losing. So he could go for this. I am sure that if Kasparov was playing a human, he would go for this. That is very much in his styles, but he has burned his fingers earlier trying to outcalculate the computer. So he doesn't go for this tremendous looking attack. He would like to play something like rook here, because in a position like this, he can't do this right now, but this is just conceptually, the attack on this pawn is actually vital. However, the rook could be captured by the bishop. That's a small detail that is super relevant in order to explain Kasparov's move. So let's go back and see what Kasparov actually played. So we saw in this whole calculation how the bishop could come in and capture a rook that landed here. So Kasparov says, let me just play a3 to kick away the bishop, and this is the best move. The bishop drops back, it is kicked again, it drops further back. And Kasparov could still go for this check. He could still go for the risky line with a winning advantage if he plays correctly. But he chooses something else, and this really shows the human aspect of chess. Kasparov is human after all. He plays pawn to c5 because he does not want to risk the draw. He does not want to sacrifice a piece and risk losing. I am sure that given this position against a human, he would have captured on h7 with the bishop and won a classic sacrificial attacking Kasparov game. But he didn't. He played pawn to c5 because he has a different strategy in mind, a strategy adapted to play not against a human but against a computer. Let's see how it plays out. Computer doesn't have that much to do. This is not possible to break, and if you don't have this break, you don't have that much activity as black here. The rook comes here, and Kasparov plays queen d3, threatening a very dangerous attack on h7, and we see pawn to g6 being played, but now the squares around black's king, namely the dark squares, look very, very exploitable. The rook drops back, and the knight tries to get into the game. Kasparov super patiently, bishop c3, saying, I have all the time in the world. h5 by deep blue. And now a further pawn push. Pawn coming to b5, chasing away the knight. The knight has to go back now. And why did this bishop come here? So that it can come here Why? Because this is the dark squared bishop. Where are the dark squared weaknesses around the king? We are now trying to get access to those. The king steps up, trying to look at the dark squares, and Kasparov returns his attention to the other side of the board, pushes pawn to a4. And you can see these pawns really stifling black's play. What can black do? This knight can't go anywhere. This knight can't go anywhere. Rooks can't go anywhere. Queen can't go anywhere. Bishop can't go anywhere. So this rook returns to a8. And Kasparov pushes on a5. a6 trying to challenge, but b6 with an attack on the bishop. The bishop drops back. And look at what Kasparov has done. He has imprisoned black. Look at this rook. This bishop cannot move to release this rook, and this rook cannot move. It might as well disappear from the board. Slowly, Kasparov starts to maneuver. Bishop c2. This knight tries to activate itself. But why did the bishop come here? To infiltrate on the light squares. Now this knight cannot move because it's pinned to the queen, and deep blue would lose the queen. Not much to do, to be honest, for black. This rook moves up. The bishop moves up, lining up against the king and making room for the rooks to move. This knight now jumps in. Wait, was that a mistake by Kasparov to allow this? Because yes, the queen, it does move out of the pin, so the queen is attacked, but Kasparov's queen is attacked, and this bishop is undefended. No, there's complete control over the situation. Kasparov just captures the knight, giving up the bishop, allowing the queen to breathe a little bit. Will this queen become active? Kasparov jumps into the center, blocking this pawn from moving and challenging this knight. The knight exchanges itself, but queen takes. Challenging this queen, the only active piece. Black cannot afford to exchange these, as the position would be completely dead, so the queen drops back into prison with the rest of the pieces. And this position is just beautiful. This is a positional masterclass, and it is very interestingly reminiscent of a style in which a neural network would much later play. When AlphaZero came, the first neural net computer in 2017, it played with this sort of strategy, giving up pawns but blocking the other pawns of the opponent and just cramping them, putting all the pieces in prison. This bishop cannot go here, it will be captured. Cannot go here, or cannot capture here. Can't move. When this bishop cannot move, the rook cannot move. Cannot even go here, be captured. So they are in prison. How about the queen? Where could the queen go? Well, it could go here, which doesn't do anything, or here. It can't go up here, can't get really active, it'd be captured. And the rook could go back if it wants to. And that is it. There are no pawn breaks and no activity for black. Bishop comes back to d2, looking again at the dark squares. The rook drops back, maybe trying to come in here and defend. But the bishop is now looking at these dark squares, maybe looking at coming in with a check here. There's nothing black can do. Black goes here. We do see the check. And the king goes off to the side to keep an eye on the infiltration square so the queen will not come in. But now Kasparov is ready to sacrifice a pawn again. Why? Because he is not really satisfied with how much in prison black's pieces are. So he plays pawn to c6. This has to be captured, and it is captured. It is defended by the rook. But Kasparov blocks the pawn. This pawn could move. It doesn't do anything. This is the pawn the computer really wanted to move. And now again, no moves for black. Black tries this move, just a waiting move, just hoping that white cannot make any progress. But the progress is right here. Rook coming to b2, now threatening to come here, being defended so the queen cannot capture, forking these two rooks and winning a rook and making a new queen, which explains why deep blue comes and stops this pawn. The rook says, I'm very active here on b2, but I'm even more active on b4 rather, and I have all the time in the world. So something remarkable is going to happen in a very short while, but let's really understand why. How much in prison is black's pieces? This pawn cannot move, it will be captured. This pawn cannot move, there is a pawn in the way. This pawn cannot move, there is a queen in the way. This pawn cannot move, there is a pawn in the way. This pawn cannot move, there is a bishop in the way. This pawn cannot move, it would be captured. This pawn cannot move, there is a pawn in the way. The king cannot go here and here because of the bishop. It has one legal move, and that is to come here. This bishop, wherever it goes, it will be captured. This rook cannot go anywhere, it will be captured. This rook cannot come here, it will be captured. It cannot come here, it will be captured. So it also cannot come here, it will be captured. Can't go here because the queen would capture, or here, but if it does go here or here, well, it will no longer be protecting the c-pawn, and Kasparov would win. If it went away, Kasparov would win the c-pawn. Queen takes, rook takes, and that is too much. That is pretty easily winning for white. Okay, so that also doesn't work. How about the queen? Can the queen move? No. If the queen goes, well, here it will be captured, here will be captured, here it will be captured. So if it goes here, again, boom, we have this protected pawn forking these two rooks and winning a rook and making a queen. And so that means that in this position, black is what we call in Zugzwang. It's a German word, means that they are forced to move, but every move they make makes their position worse. And the position is so crushing for white that the deep blue team in this position resigned. But was that too early? Of course, there was a huge applause. Kasparov had defended humanity. He won this game. He only needed a draw, but he made a statement. Came in, said, I could go for the draw, but I could also just win the game and win the match 3-1. Let's explore how he would have won the game if the computer did not resign. So the only move that doesn't just lose on the spot is the only legal move for the king. And the point now is that with all these pieces in this box over here that they can't escape from, we can now attack the king at our leisure. We start with g4. We'll just take a look at one variation, which would be pawn takes and rook takes. Rook is now coming into the game, and there are many ways that this could go, but the shortest checkmate that sort of illustrates the point is if the king went up like so, then it's checkmate in 7. And it goes like this. This pawn advances. The king would have to go back, and pawn takes. That is check. Pawn recaptures. You can see the king is getting very naked. all the way back with the queen coordinating an attack here. You could try to defend with the rook, but if you do, this is checkmate. And if you do not defend it with the rook, the only alternative would be to try to run with the king. But of course, queen takes here, that is check. You could give up the queen, that would be checkmate. That doesn't work. And if you try to move away any further, we have checkmate like this, the escape square here covered by the bishop. And obviously seeing these lines in its calculation, Deep Blue says Kasparov has an easy forced win and we must resign. And with that, we are at the end of the first part of the saga of Kasparov versus Deep Blue. But immediately after this, the Deep Blue team, sponsored by IBM, issued a challenge for a rematch to be played the next year in 1997, and indeed that is the next match that we will look at in this series. Thank you very much. Before I end the video, I want to say thanks to all of you who watch, and a special warm thanks to my patrons who support me and make it possible for me to pay the rent here at the studio. If you are not a patron but you would like me to make more videos, better videos, get the equipment I need and the time I need to research and make more videos, there is a link in the description for my Patreon, and it would be greatly appreciated. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a great time. I sure did. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.